Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Roto NBA Daily Fantasy Show here on March 31st. Big slate ahead of us. We have some news to watch out for. First, we are starting with Kyle Lowry being announced out. Then we have some key questionables here. Jaylen Brown, questionable. Zach LaVine, questionable. John Wall is questionable. Kendrick Nunn for the Heat. Derrick Rose for the New York Knicks, Kobe White also for the Chicago Bulls. So Pacheco, we have Kyle Lowry out. That is being adjusted for in the projections. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time there. That is definitely a situation that we have gotten more comfortable with as he has missed games over the last couple nights. We have Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby all showing as values on DraftKings. What changes do we mostly see to the rotation here with Kyle Lowry out?
Yeah, just in general, Davis, we might as well hit on this game here and get us started with Toronto at OKC, because on the other side, we have your boy Poku missing tonight on top of all the other injuries that they already have. So this is a game that will feature value for sure. So Gary Trent is one of the newcomers for Toronto. Norman Powell was traded for him here. So I think he's going to play a lot of minutes. But really, Davis, this is going to be the Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet show. I think the one thing that Gary Trent Jr. Isn't able to do as well as Norman Powell does is playmaking. And as a result, I think a lot of that is going to fall in Siakam and VanVleet's shoulders tonight. These are guys that play a lot of minutes, especially in competitive games, but even in blowouts, their minutes floor are just fantastic. So, they're always pretty strong cash game plays when this situation arises. But I think tonight, what you're also seeing from them is they're pretty strong tournament plays as well, because I think there's a ceiling beyond this projection, this medium projection that they have right now. The one challenge is their ownership on FanDuel is probably going to get a bit out of control. On DraftKings, when all settles, they're probably going to be in the mid 20s, low 30s. So it's not as bad as it will be on FanDuel. But these are going to be some of the stronger plays on the entire slate.
Yeah, I think we see lots of ownership flow to Fred VanVleet. I think we see lots of ownership flow to Pascal Siakam. I think that, the obvious ways to subvert that, OG Anunoby, he's been playing super heavy minutes, 31, 38, 38. And actually his usage on offense has been a little bit better than we kind of remember with him. So he's kind of the pivot or the leverage play off of Siakam. And then at the guard spot, I think in MME, you can include Rodney Hood in that mix because they still don't have Paul Watson active. They still don't have McCaw active. Rodney Hood, they've given him like 24-ish minutes on a couple of these occasions. I think he's a little bit playable. But if I was going to play one of them less, I would play Siakam less because there's a more obvious pivot with Anunoby, and I would pay Fred VanVleet more. On the Oklahoma City side, I think Theo, I think Ty Jerome, I think Kenrich Williams, I think Isaiah Roby, and I think Moses Brown are pretty much all plays on FanDuel and DraftKings and would be comfortable playing them, kind of at whatever we have them projected in terms of ownership. Like I think I would rather get over the field than try and make leverage plays there. Specifically Roby, by the way. I think Roby has the most to gain in this exact circumstance. Also, we're not sure what they want to do with Tony Bradley. Like he played 14 minutes the other night for them, but it's unclear if they view Bradley as someone they traded for or if he's in the Muscala Horford bucket where they're like, he's fine, but we want to see what we have in Roby and in Moses Brown. So Roby is the one on the Thunder I would really try to make a stand on. So let's just go ahead and get into our game by game now. The first one here we have is Portland, Detroit. Portland completely healthy other than Nas Little. Detroit Dennis Smith Jr. is out, but at guard they have Justin Jackson, Hamidou Diallo, Saban Lee, Corey Joseph. They're pretty much full up. Does anyone in this game particularly interest you?
Well, I think McCollum is still at a price tag where you could kind of hammer that on DraftKings. Same thing on FanDuel. He's priced in the eights, both sites. So I think those are pretty good price hikes for CJ, and I think Dame coming back down to earth on pricing as well is kind of attractive to me in the slate. Davis. Those are the guys that I'd seriously consider on the Portland side. I know Nurkic is really cheap on FanDuel. Challenges the minutes are just unlikely to be there in a meaningful way. But on FanDuel at 5K, he doesn't really even need 28 minutes to get there in a pretty substantial way. So that one I thought was pretty interesting on FanDuel, but on DraftKings 5,300, 10-game slate. I think for largely I'm passing on that. Detroit's also not going to have Wayne Ellington tonight, but at least he's projecting right now as doubtful on the injury report. They're not going to have Rodney Magruder either, Davis. So certainly more minutes available for Hamidou Diallo. Josh Jackson, who didn't get into the rotation last game, I'm expecting him to crack it this time around. And I think, as we saw last game, there is plenty of opportunity here for Saban Lee to play point guard and kind of be the initiator in this offense. I think on DraftKings, he's priced at a level where I'd take some shots at 4,300 as long as he's not, overly popular like he was last time. This time, looks like because he got a little bit of a price bump, his ownership isn't going to be as substantial.
Yeah. So Hamidou Diallo in his first real game as a member of the Detroit Pistons, 27 minutes, 10 shots, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, 1 steal, 43 DraftKings points on 19 real points. That obviously is going to be a difficult performance for him to duplicate. But I think he seems at least a little bit interesting. Next up, we have the Heat and the Pacers. No Victor Oladipo yet for the Miami Heat. We have Kendrick Nunn projected in. If Kendrick Nunn is out for this game, I can see Tyler Hierro getting to 31-ish, 32-ish minutes, something like that. I don't think he would enter in the starting lineup, but definitely would be someone to consider. And then we have Bam and Jimmy projected as strong values. I don't think either one of them are, must plays or anything, but I'd be comfortable being in line with the field. I guess the one thing you could say is Jimmy is maybe a little underpriced relative to his ceiling because we know he has that 55, 60 point ceiling that a lot of other $8,000 guys don't. But I'm not super interested in this game overall.
So I think Goran Dragic is the other one that would receive somewhat of a boost if Kendrick Nunn isn't able to go out there. We didn't really see Dragic play meaningful minutes in his first game back last time out, but he did start. So that one was kind of interesting to me. But the price tag on DraftKings is 5,100, so he would need upper 20s minutes to start projecting a little bit better for us. You kind of nailed it here. It's Jimmy, it's Bam. Bam on FanDuel is center eligible in 9,400, so those are some pretty clear negatives for him in this slate. 8,200 on DraftKings, I think is certainly more doable. Same with Jimmy, 8,800 on DraftKings. Find it, pretty decent. But as you mentioned, not a ton of interest in this game. It's, it has a decent 218 total, but it's a 10-game slate, and a lot of these guys are just priced right where they need to be.
Yeah. On the Pacers side, we don't have anyone on FanDuel graded out as a value. I guess the one guy I would be interested in is Miles Turner because he is going to be like 1% owned, 2% owned in MME contests. And I think he's got a little bit of minutes upside. So we have him projected for 31. I could see him in a tight competitive game, just playing, them just going with Sabonis at the 4, Turner at the 5, giving him 33, 34 minutes. But I mean, even with Sabonis, Brogdon, and LeVert all active, it's really just putting a pinch on their minutes, essentially, or not on the minutes, on the usage, and it's just kind of too equally distributed right now.
Yeah, and Turner, he just doesn't get the ball in this offense, Davis. So it's really tough for him. But the stocks upside for him on FanDuel, it makes him such a nice tournament play that I'd be comfortable going back to that. I'm still not comfortable going to Karis LeVert. The pricing for him, unfortunately, just hasn't shaken out the way he needs it right now in this offense. Sabonis, Brogdon are fine pieces on FanDuel. Brogdon at 6,600 on FanDuel. I thought that was pretty nice. But one of the notes I've made on Indiana lately is that their minutes really haven't been what they were for Brogdon and Sabonis earlier in the season. These guys were routinely playing 37, 38 minutes, and that's just not what it is right now. So if that's the case, it does hurt their ceiling a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Our next game, Houston at Brooklyn. Huge spread here. So let's say both John Wall and Christian Wood sit. Christian Wood is listed as probable, but let's just have this thought exercise, right?
Let's do it.
So the guards active for the Rockets would be Kevin Porter Jr., Jayshawn Tate, Sterling Brown, DJ Augustin, Avery Bradley. And then we don't have McLemore projected for any minutes right now. Is that because he's out, or are we just projecting him out of the rotation?
Well, last game they decided to play Avery Bradley over Benny Mack, so that's the reason why he's just not projecting in the rotation right now.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking through guys they would have active. This would not be a nine bodies active or whatever situation. Yeah.
No. Yeah, it wouldn't.
So the only Rocket I would play would be Kevin Porter Jr. if John Wall was out. I would because I mean, you would know better than I would, but let's say this is a 25-point game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Is Kevin Porter Jr. getting one last rotation, or are they putting in, Ben McLemore and DJ Augustin? I would assume there's at least a chance Kevin Porter Jr. stays in, and he will have so much of the usage when the game is close that I would be fine. That I would be fine taking a shot on him, but he would be the only one. I'm not playing Jayshawn Tate. I'm not playing Patton, who I think would be the starting center if Wood was. I'm not playing any of these guys. It would be Kevin Porter Jr. only.
Well, I think you do have to have some level of interest on Kelly O, who
he's. I'm wrong. I said Patton. I meant Kelly O.
Yeah.
He's been so good when someone has been missing from that rotation, but I feel pretty confident they would pull Kelly. I feel pretty confident. 24-point game. Yeah. And this is a huge spread, right? One of the biggest we've seen this season.
Yeah, it is. It looks like it's a 13-point spread at the moment. And in that scenario, Davis, blowout. Yeah, you probably are not going to see Kelly O out there. You could certainly see Kevin Porter Jr. He had been listed on the injury report a few times here of late. Tonight he isn't. So that's a clear positive for me. That hopefully he's just healthy and ready to go. He would just rate in another, bucket outside of these, 6K guys on DraftKings if John Wall was missing, because he'd essentially become the point guard of this offense. With John Wall in there, Kevin Porter Jr. is starting, but he's not the point guard. John Wall is. So his projection would change in a pretty darn meaningful way. And if Wood is out, Kelly O is also going to rate a little bit better, because he would at least be the starting center. We'd have to project at least 28, 29 minutes there. And if the game is competitive, there's a little bit more upside, especially in an offense, Dave, is that when Wall especially if Wall's out, right? You mentioned that scenario of no Wall and no Christian Wood. Kelly O is going to fire. He's going to shoot the ball. So that's one of the things that I think gives him a little bit of upside, not just on the minutes, but the fact that his usage rate isn't really awful in this offense.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So I think the biggest question of the day is what happens with James Harden, right? Does he get to 65 points in 3 quarters? Does he need the fourth quarter rotation? Does Kyrie Irving handle more? Now, obviously we have the revenge game here against the Houston Rockets. I think in cash games, you probably are playing Harden regardless. I mean, he is just even in this huge slate, he just is clearly he's just clearly the best play, right? No way around that. In single entry and in 3 max, I'm more inclined to not play him, I think, because he's not quite Russell Westbrook, right? Where, well, maybe he is. Harden has just been so good this year that maybe he just gets 60 and 3/4 anyway. I mean, where are you at on Harden?
Well, the rates on Russ without Beal, if that's what you're referencing, it's not the same. It's just not the same. I mean, Russ had been holding on to a 60% plus assist rate without Beal out there. So Russ is just a different monster. But Harden is more efficient. Harden does have better teammates that will convert his assists more times than not. And so, the projection ends up being a little bit similar between these two. But we don't have Russ available tonight, Davis. And so Harden is pretty clearly the top play on the board. But as I've mentioned before, my main concern is always the blowout, especially against these horrible teams. We've seen them get to 60 and 3. Getting to the 80 and beyond that, you need the fourth quarter rotation. So as confident as I am on him in cash games, I think you're right. I'd be looking at someone else in tournaments, whether it's more of a balanced build tonight, which I think is achievable, or just going to Giannis and Luka, who have been kind of letdowns of late, but maybe that lowers their ownership a little bit tonight. And if that's the case, then I think they end up being pretty attractive spends as well.
Yeah, I guess it does kind of impact. It's the context of the slate impacts it, because Giannis is in a huge spread game. I could see Doncic getting under-owned though, because he should play 4 competitive quarters, right? Against this Boston team. Now he has a really tough individual defensive matchup against Marcus Smart, but relative to the slate, I could see Harden getting over-owned, Doncic getting under-owned.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't think Luka's going to be much owned in this slate, especially on DraftKings. He seems to be a guy that's probably going to hover in the 10 to 12%, and he actually has a bigger optimal percentage than James Harden tonight, Davis. So ends up being one of the better leverage plays on the entire slate. So if you have some confidence there in that matchup against Boston with Luka, fire away.
Yeah. All right, moving on to our next game. Appropriately enough, Dallas at Boston. None of the Boston guys really look appealing other than Robert Williams. So, because we're projecting Jaylen Brown in, obviously, if Jaylen Brown doesn't play, Marcus Smart at 5,900 becomes a little bit more appealing. Tatum a little bit more appealing. No one from Boston really speaks to me. And then on the Dallas side, Zinger maybe a little bit, because he will be 5% owned on DraftKings, but Doncic I do think looks really strong.
Yeah, one of the challenges on the Boston side is that with everyone healthy, including Fournier, that becomes a little bit tougher, right? Fournier isn't a guy that's like a 18% usage rate and 12% assist rate. His rates are a little bit better than that, and so it's enough to impact the rest of the guys. And so we would need Jaylen Brown to not play to kind of unlock Tatum and unlock some of these other guys on the Boston side. On the Dallas side, everyone outside of Luka, and you could argue Kristaps on DraftKings, is priced correctly or just flat out overpriced. I think you could take some steps at Josh Richardson, and just hope that his threes fall in tonight. But outside of that, you really want to play Dorian Finney-Smith. I know he's really cheap, but just doesn't do much outside of play a lot of minutes.
Yeah. All right. We have already covered Toronto and Oklahoma City. That's kind of the bonanza game of the night. I mean, I think you'll see a lot of lineups with 4 players probably from that game. So we can skip to Utah, Memphis. I was doing a little bit of Top Shot research today. Do you know off the top of your head what Ja Morant is shooting from 3-point range this year?
Oh man, it's not good. It has to be under 30%. right?
It
Am I
is.
right?
It is under 30%. Pacheco, he is shooting 23% from three this year. His career 3-point percentage, because he's been so bad this year, is down to 29% for his career. I mean, not great. And he's a guy I've been like kind of trying to force in a little bit over the last couple weeks. And I first off, this is not the spot for it. No, thank you. So we do have some value on the Utah side. I don't feel comfortable bringing back any Grizzly player. Not one of them.
Oh man, I think
it's brutal, but
you're probably right. You're probably right. As much as I love Ja, and it's not that the projection's wrong. It's just that we haven't really seen the upper echelon, right? Like the ceiling. We really haven't seen it much. And not shooting well from three is one of the things that'll do it, right? Just not being efficient from there. So it hurts because the pricing on him, especially on FanDuel, 6,800. I mean, that looks incredible. But if he's going to be owned, I don't want to do that. Joe Val also feels like a play that against Utah is really tough. They could just play him off the floor. In the minutes that he's there, he could always be productive. But it seems like a really tough matchup overall for Memphis. On the Utah side is really where you get all the value, right? We don't have Don Mitchell tonight, Davis. And so that is going to unlock a lot of Jazz players tonight. One of them is Mike Conley, who I have been very reluctant to play in DFS this season because there's just no ceiling to him when Don Mitchell is in this offense. When Don Mitchell's not in this offense, you are going to see a different ceiling for Mike Conley. Fantasy performance in the 40s all of a sudden becomes unlocked, and his median projection is 39 DraftKings points. So I think he's one of the better plays on the slate. Jordan Clarkson's shooting has been pretty horrific, but if he shoots well, this could be a really big night for him as well. We should see Joe Ingles get into the starting lineup, and he has done really well. Essentially any game that he's entered the starting lineup this season. So there's going to be some value there. There's going to be some value on Rudy Gobert. This Jazz team is just going to rate really well tonight. Their price tags weren't really ready for no Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah. So this is my thought. Rudy Gobert always projects pretty well when someone else is out of the lineup, right? Whether it be Don, whether it be Jingles, it just doesn't or Clarkson. He just picks up some of that usage. I don't like, that's just not the style of player he is. So this is a non-math take, but I would be way more interested in playing Jingles or Bogdanovich than I would be Gobert, because Gobert, it's not like Gobert is like you dump the ball to him or run 30 pick and rolls for Rudy Gobert. Like, I would be more interested in the secondary guys like Ingles, Bogdanovich, or Royce O'Neal, as opposed to paying 8,100 for Gobert. That's how I like it.
I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand Don Mitchell out is a 33% usage rate, which is clearly the highest on this Utah team. And Gobert, believe it or not, had been clearly benefiting twice that this happened this season, which is a ridiculously small sample, right? But it's the only times that we've seen it. And he really destroyed in those matchups against Dallas. I remember those games vividly. They started Porzingis at the 5. He had no business starting at the 5 there against Rudy, and Rudy just kind of dominated him. So the usage is going to scale a little bit for everyone, as you mentioned, right, Davis? But I think Gobert grabbing some of that is fair. Conley, Clarkson, those are the guys that are going to have the ball actually on their hands more, right? Gobert's not a guard; he's a center, and so he's also not a very much of a post-up player. He needs pick and rolls and kind of the alley-oops, right, to generate his offense. So if that's there tonight, I think there's also a ceiling to him. So I'm going to go against the grain against you here, and I really do like him in this slate on both sides. All
right, our next game, the New York Knicks against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Derrick Rose is still questionable, I believe, but his price tag is down on DraftKings to 4,800. That would definitely make him a play. On the Minnesota side, Karl Anthony Towns, still a little bit underpriced. Definitely not going to be popular on this slate at all with Harden, with all the value at center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moses Brown, Roby, guys like that. Anthony Edwards has seen his usage rate trimmed a little bit with Malik Beasley back in the lineup as well. I mean, I'm looking at Rose and Karl Anthony Towns here. Not a super interesting game for daily fantasy.
No, that's typically the case in any game that New York's involved because of their defense and their pace. It really does impact the opposing team. And so the one thing I could say on Cat tonight is the ownership that you mentioned. I think it could be really nice. But the one concern that I had on him last game was that I did think that his usage rate could be a little bit more compromised with Malik Beasley in here. That's kind of what happened. So we now have like 3 kind of alphas in Minnesota, and we are going to need some price adjustments here before I could seriously recommend any of these guys. I think Beasley on FanDuel at 5,600 is a play, but outside of that, I do like Anthony Edwards as a prospect as a rookie, but him being priced in the 7K range right now, it's just a little bit tough to pay.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and just skip to at least a more exciting team, the Sacramento Kings. We have De'Aaron Fox just in the run of his life. A guy I like more than the projections, Rashawn Holmes, with no Marvin Bagley and only Hassan Whiteside behind him. He does have more minutes upside. He can get to 35, 36 minutes, but also he just has usage upside. We're not playing next to Bagley. He just can end more possessions. And I think he is one of those 7K guys who actually does have like a 50K or a 50-point ceiling.
Oh, absolutely. As a ceiling, you're not wrong there. He still kind of has that in his profile, especially without Bagley around. And I think Fox is the other king that has monstrous upside on any given night. These Kings, Davis, are kind of right there in the competing for the play-in game. I think it's a possibility that if all these guys stay healthy, you might see them in the play-in game when the postseason comes. They are playing a very tight rotation right now, which is just what you want to see for DFS. But a lot of the challenges with that is that pricing starts to get adjusted pretty quickly. So on DraftKings, we don't really have anyone popping as a median value. It's only on FanDuel where Harry Barnes and Halliburton are kind of popping because they're priced in the mid fives. I would still take stabs on someone like De'Aaron Fox in the slate. Really like him essentially every night out because I think his 60-point upside is very real, and in the slate he's not going to have any ownership.
Yeah. All right, the Spurs on DraftKings, we actually have DeMar, Deontay, Jakob Poeltl, Derek White all showing up as values. I don't imagine these guys are going to hit a ton of optimal lineups because of how much value there is in the rest of the slate. Yeah. I mean, maybe you could tell yourself, the Kings pretty much play center 48 minutes, so maybe Poeltl has minute upside to like 33 or something. Maybe Derek White, you think he could have some in-game usage rate upside that is not reflected. I mean, he's receiving a strong minutes projection. Do you want to cape for any of the Spurs players?
Well, I think on DraftKings with the Spurs, I've been doing this all season. They are just, where's their pricing at? And so, DeJounte is 7K. I think it's fine. DeRozan at 7,600 is much better than where he was priced in the 8s the other night. So I would take some stabs there. I'm pretty much out on Keldon Johnson. And it's not because of the recent few games here where he's only played minutes in the 20s. It's just because I wish he was a little bit cheaper. 5K Keldon just needs to be cheaper than that for me to seriously consider him. So it's a 10 gamer, Davis. And so unless the Spurs are priced in a way where I think they could be values, I'm not going to recommend them.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and go now to the Bucks at the Lakers. Giannis obviously receiving a great projection at 10.5. We have him projected for 15% of rosters on DraftKings. Pretty solid play there. Drew Holiday, 7,100 on DraftKings. Pretty solid there. On the Lakers side, no salary for Andre Drummond, but we know that he is going to be starting this game, right? So obviously, you know, we're not really wanting to play Trez, not really wanting to play Markieff, not really wanting to play Taylor Norton-Tucker. I do think that Schroeder might be a little underpriced, especially if this remains a competitive game. Right now, the spread is 9 points, but if this is a competitive game, I think we could see Schroeder, you know, get 40, 42, 43 around there again, and that would leave him a little underpriced.
Yeah, I'm with you on Schroeder. He's kind of a sneaky guy in this slate. In terms of where we have him projected, it's really tough to really capture everything that LeBron James and Anthony Davis leave behind. But you're going to get a much lower total than usual for the Lakers. And we've had to do a lot of digging on the team baselines for this team without those two guys. It's just a lot of rates that are left over. And we know that Kuzma and Schroeder are two of those guys that receive as big a boost as it gets for this team. But now they also get Andre Drummond Davis, who is a center that can, you know, generate a lot of big rates. And he's only 5,200 on FanDuel, which I was a little bit surprised at this price tag. On DraftKings, he's 7,800. So priced in a completely different world over there. But on FanDuel at 5,200, I'm assuming he's going to get some real ownership here, especially if he starts. You know, there's going to be some questions on his rates, but essentially anywhere Drummond goes, you know, his rates are always big. And so I don't, especially with LeBron and AD in here, I don't really see any issue for his rates. It's really a conversation on the minutes. And as long as he gets into the 20s, he's probably going to crush this FanDuel price tag.
Yeah. I mean, and do you think what do you think he ends up getting owned on FanDuel? My thought is he probably ends up being a little bit under-owned in this first game.
Oof, under-owned. So I don't know, man. I think he's probably going to end up somewhere in the 30% range would be my best guess right now. I know Gobert I know Gobert has a decent value rating on FanDuel for sure. I know Robert Williams is going to get some ownership. Moses Brown's also going to get some ownership. But I think Drummond at that price tag, I'd be really surprised if he didn't grab at least 30% ownership.
Yeah. All right. Our final game, I think, has huge question marks here. Chicago versus Phoenix. No one from Phoenix is questionable, but if I had to guess, Pacheco, and I know this isn't how we do the projections, my guess is that both Levine and Kobe White do not play.
Okay, so you want to talk about that? Talk about that scenario specifically?
Yeah. So my question is, Thomas Satoransky is already priced up a little bit because he's been seeing more minutes, so he's at 4,500 now. Ryan Arakadikino. I have no idea how to say this dude's last name. But is Garrett Temple out of the rotation? Is Denzel Valentine out of the rotation? Or are those guys banged up? I don't actually know.
No, those guys are banged up. Temple's just doubtful tonight.
Yeah.
Valentine could potentially play. This Bulls team has been so full lately that hasn't been able to crack the rotation.
Yeah. So if both of those guys were out, I assume they start Satoransky at point guard and Valentine at shooting guard. And Denzel Valentine, as a minimum salary guy, he always comes through. He just loves to get there as the minimum salary guy. And so these are the other guards they have available. They have Javonte Green, who they got in that Celtics trade. They have Damian Dotson, who is not with the team. Well, the most recent update. Well, no, he is with the team. He is with the team. He was not with the team. He was in the G League, and now he is. He is now back with the team. And then Adam Mokoka, who I think is with the team as well. So I guess this could get ugly depending on how the coaching staff wants to play it. Let's say in the brain of Pacheco, Kobe White's out, Zach LaVine's out. How are you projecting it? Who do you think are the values here?
Well, you're right in terms of they can make more guys active in this one, but Makoka hasn't played in quite a bit. I probably don't really see him cracking the rotation because they could just very easily go with activating Denzel Valentine and playing him, and then playing Troy Brown and Javonte Green. Troy Brown, newly acquired Troy Brown from the Washington Wizards. I think there is at least a chance that Troy Brown gets a start here, Davis. He's been in the rotation over Valentine lately. So I think that's kind of interesting to me. Essentially, if whoever starts here between Valentine and Troy Brown, I certainly think those guys would intrigue me at minimum price. Javonte Green would not intrigue me at all. I'm really hoping that that's not who we get from the Bulls. I really hope it's Troy Brown or Denzel Valentine because those guys can actually do stuff for fantasy. Javonte Green doesn't do anything for fantasy. Thomas Satoransky would certainly play 30 plus minutes. I think I would bank on that. Especially if just Kobe White missed. I'd be very comfortable projecting 30 for Satoransky. And you're right on Arcidiacono. I think he would, he'd probably play backup point. So he'd play, 15, 16 minutes. But beyond that, I think this is between Troy Brown, Valentine, if he were to be active in this one, which I think he would without Levine, and then Javonte Green, who is probably going to play some minutes, but I reluctantly wouldn't want him to start because he's not going to do anything for DFS.
Yeah. And then I guess on the Philadelphia or the Phoenix Sun side, it's just very hard, obviously, to pick between Booker and Paul. If you wanted to bring back Ayton, would be the one guy I would feel comfortable playing in tournaments. And then I guess the question is, when do we get this news? Is it at 4:30 or is it after lock? That is the last game of the night. Do you try and build with a couple Lakers? Do you leave Giannis in there? I guess the way I'm going to do it is I probably am just going to err on the side of not playing anyone from the 6 o'clock games. So no Portland, no Detroit, no Miami, no Pacers. And then just try and leave as much as possible. Because I do think that at least one of Levine or Kobe White is not going to play. What do you think about Ayton for tournaments as the bring back?
I think Ayton's fine. The challenge on DraftKings is those price tags on Booker and Paul. They're just not. That's really tough for me to pay on this slate, and it's a similar type of challenge on FanDuel. Though Paul is priced at 7,400. That's okay. It's okay. It's just generally speaking, Paul's not going to get you 40 plus FanDuel points a lot of the times, and at 7,400, you really need to start to get into some of that upside. And Paul typically doesn't have it. But I'm okay with Ayton. I'm okay with Bridges on FanDuel specifically. He's 5,300. I'm okay with that. And I would say, Davis, the quotes on Levine haven't been great. He himself was kind of expecting to miss some time. So I'm not exactly sure why the Bulls are just listing him questionable instead of ruling him out. It does give him a chance to play. But if I was to get right, this is me as a player instead of me as the person behind the projections, I would just build without Levine in the slate. Would X him out altogether. I would certainly boost Troy Brown and Denzel Valentine in a playable range. I wouldn't make them like ridiculous values. I would just make them, kind of pop in a playable range. And then hope that the news falls in your favor and one of those guys ends up starting. And in that scenario, they do become playable. If they weren't starting, I think that'd make it a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I'm with that. An example of how that works. Last night's slate, 4-game slate. If you just built like Paul George was not going to play, and there was loads of value in that first game, right? Denny Avdija, Jerome Robinson. The backup Cody Martin for the Hornets and stuff. But you were rewarded waiting for Reggie Jackson, waiting for Luke Kennard, those other Clippers rotational players. It's a great example of that tonight. Any other big GPP takes we want out for the people? I think my big take tonight is going to be, I'm just playing 4 guys from that Toronto-Oklahoma City game, and then probably Doncic over Harden, and then I'm going to slot in Denzel Valentine and just, deal with it if LaVine and Kobe White end up playing.
Yeah, we'll have to see. The other night I had mentioned how ownership seemed to be pretty spread out, and I was really comfortable with that. But then Westbrook became to play. Remember that big slate because Bradley Beal was out, and so the things generally speaking don't work out the way I'm thinking about them at 4:24 Eastern, simply because the NBA is just always crazy on the alerts period. But to your point of just making Luka being your differentiator tonight, it might just be that, right? It could just be going as simple as Luka over Harden, and that's really your main difference. I think that could work out. But in general, Davis, I would preach for people in GPPs to continue to take stands against the projections. I think the projections have been running pretty hot, and it's like people are still not winning, and it's literally nothing against our projections or the players. It's just that everyone uses projections now.
Well, just think about it. If the projections are good,
yes,
there's a very strong chance that everyone else you're playing against is also going to have good lineups because projections are very similar. So you need to be doing things that are not accounted for in the projection, or then it's like, oh, you have a lineup full of chalk, and then you played 2% owned guy who was a terrible play but got 44. And that's a less sustainable way to win.
I'm with you. It's just I've noticed, especially lately, the high scoring nights have been absurd, just absurd. Especially those Westbrook slates without Beal, and then Harden going bananas in some of those without Kyrie as well. It's not that the projections aren't doing well; they're doing really well, and it's not good because everyone's using them. Whether it's here at Daily Roto or somewhere else, people are using projections generally, and for NBA they're generally going to be pretty good. Yeah. So to your point on Chicago, you might have to do something like that tonight to separate yourself from the pack. And if it doesn't work in your favor, you lost tonight. But you have to do things like that to separate yourself. Outside of that, you're playing what everyone else is playing. To put it, to put it in other words.
Yeah. All right, everyone. That's going to do it for us here today. We will be back tomorrow, opening day of baseball, but Pacheco and I will still be here grinding hard. So see you guys then.